The metal door slammed against the wall with a deafening crash as she barged into my workshop, her phone held high like some kind of weapon. She was already mid-rant. Something about code violations and unauthorized structures when the first alarm went off. Then the red lights started flashing. I watched for my security monitor as her confident stride faltered, her eyes widening as she realized she wasn't in some ordinary garage. The automated voice boomed through the speakers, warning about federal property breach. And that's when she really started to panic. By the time the armed response team surrounded her 45 seconds later, Karen Fitzgerald had gone from neighborhood tyrant to federal suspect. She thought she was enforcing HOA rules. Instead, she just breached a classified evidence site. My name is Mike Sullivan, and I'm a retired FBI forensic technician. After 30 years of analyzing evidence in sterile government labs, I decided to semi-retire to the quiet town of Riverside Heights. The key word there being quiet. I still work on contract for various federal agencies, maintaining and analyzing evidence from the comfort of my rural property. My workshop sits at the back of my 5-acre lot, a converted barn that I'd spent 2 years retrofitting to meet federal security standards. Soundproofed walls, biometric locks, temperature-controlled storage, and enough surveillance equipment to make Fort Knox jealous. Everything was done by the book, with proper permits and clearances. I kept to myself, worked odd hours, and bothered absolutely no one. That all changed when the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association expanded its territory. See, when I bought my property 8 years ago, there was no HOA anywhere near me. But as the town grew and new developments sprouted up around the edges, some genius decided to create an HOA that somehow included properties that had never agreed to be part of it. Enter Karen Fitzgerald, self-appointed president and compliance enforcer extraordinaire. She was the type who measured grass height with a ruler and sent violation notices for mailboxes that were half a shade off the approved color palette. The first time I encountered Karen was at the local coffee shop. She marched up to me while I was reading the paper and announced that she was conducting a neighborhood census for the HOA. When I politely informed her that my property wasn't part of any HOA, she laughed in my face. She actually laughed and said, "That's what they all say." She handed me a thick packet of rules and regulations, told me I had 2 weeks to bring my property into compliance, and strewed it away before I could even respond. I did what any reasonable person would do. I ignored her. My property predated the HOA by decades, and I had the paperwork to prove it. But Karen wasn't the type to let facts get in the way of her authority. The harassment started small. First came the letters, professionally printed on HOA letterhead, citing me for everything from improper fence height to unapproved exterior lighting. I responded to each one with a copy of my property deed and a polite reminder that I wasn't part of their association. Then came the complaints. Karen started telling anyone who would listen that something suspicious was happening on my property. She claimed she heard strange noises at all hours, which was impossible given that my workshop was soundproof to federal standards. She said she smelled chemical odors, even though I was a 4 mile from the nearest neighbor. She even started a rumor that I was running some kind of illegal operation using phrases like meth lab and criminal enterprise with the confidence of someone who'd watched too many crime shows. The situation escalated when Karen organized a concerned citizens meeting at the community center. I only heard about it because Tom Bradley, my nearest neighbor and a decent guy, gave me a heads up. Apparently, Karen had spent an hour presenting her evidence of my suspicious activities, which amounted to blurry photos of my workshop taken from the road and a log of the time she'd seen me coming and going. She demanded that the HOA take action, insisting that I was a danger to the community. What Karen didn't know was that every single one of her harassment attempts had been documented. The federal agencies I work with take security very seriously, and part of my contract included reporting any suspicious activity around the facility. Each letter, each trespassing attempt, each false complaint had been logged and forwarded to the appropriate departments. I'd been advised to let her dig her own hole, and she was doing a spectacular job of it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd received a call about a priority evidence shipment that needed immediate processing, So I had to drive to the federal building downtown to sign the chain of custody papers. The round trip would take maybe 2 hours. I locked up the workshop, activated the security system, and headed out. I should have known Karen was watching. She'd probably been waiting for weeks for me to leave the property. According to the security footage I reviewed later, she waited exactly 12 minutes after I left before making her move. She parked her car at the end of my driveway and walked purposefully toward the workshop, carrying a clipboard and wearing what she probably thought looked like an official inspector's outfit. She tried the main door first, rattling the handle and peering through the reinforced windows. When that didn't work, she circled the building, checking every possible entry point. That's when she found the ventilation hatch. It wasn't meant to be an entrance, just a small access panel for maintenance. But Karen was determined. She pried at it with a screwdriver she brought along, working at it for a solid 10 minutes until the panel popped open. She squeezed through the opening, probably feeling very clever about her investigative skills. What she didn't realize was that she just triggered about 15 different security protocols. The moment she breached the perimeter, silent alarms went off at 3 different federal agencies. The workshop's internal security system immediately locked down, sealing all exits and activating the emergency lighting. Karen found herself in a narrow maintenance corridor, red lights flashing, and a computerized voice repeatedly announcing that she had entered a restricted federal facility and should remain where she was. According to the footage, she tried to go back the way she came, but the ventilation hatch had automatically sealed behind her. She stumbled forward into the main workshop area, and that's when she really started to panic. The room was filled with locked evidence cabinets, each bearing federal seals and chain of custody documentation. Computer screens displayed classified evidence tags. A large sign on the wall read Federal Evidence Storage Facility, authorized personnel only. 18 USC Section 795. Karen's phone camera was working overtime as she spun in circles trying to document what she thought was evidence of my crimes. The federal response team arrived in under 6 minutes. 3 black SUVs pulled up, and a dozen agents in tactical gear surrounded the building. They announced themselves over loudspeakers, ordering anyone inside to lie face down with hands visible. I can only imagine what was going through Karen's mind as she complied, probably for the first time in her life. The agents breached the workshop and found her sprawled on the floor, clutching her clipboard and stammering about HOA inspections. I arrived home to find my driveway filled with federal vehicles and Karen being let out in handcuffs. Agent Patricia Hawkins, whom I'd worked with for years, met me at the security perimeter. She was trying very hard not to smile as she explained the situation. I provided my credentials and access codes, confirming that Karen had no authorization to be in the facility. When asked if I wanted to press charges, I simply nodded and handed over the folder I'd been keeping of all her harassment. The next few hours were a blur of statements and paperwork. Karen was transported to the federal building for processing. Her car was impounded as evidence. The agents conducted a full security sweep of the facility to ensure nothing had been compromised. By evening, the story had already hit the local news. The headline read, "Local HOA president arrested for breaking into federal facility." The news segment included footage of Karen being led away in handcuffs, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, and her face a mask of shock and indignation. The fallout was swift and severe. The HOA held an emergency meeting the very next day. Without Karen there to intimidate them, the board members finally admitted that my property had never legally been part of the association. They voted unanimously to dissolve the entire organization rather than face potential lawsuits from other homeowners who'd been illegally targeted. Several neighbors came forward with their own stories of Karen's harassment and overreach. But the real consequences were just beginning for Karen. She was charged with breaking and entering federal property, attempted theft of classified materials, and interference with federal operations. Her phone, which she'd used to take pictures inside the facility, was confiscated as evidence. Every photo she'd taken was considered a potential security breach. The prosecutor explained that she was looking at serious federal charges that could result in up to 5 years in prison and fines exceeding $100,000.